Joining us right now, Hall of Famer, former Toronto Blizzard and North York Rockets, but most importantly in my heart, he represented Canada at the last World Cup they were in 1986 in Mexico, Randy Ragan. Randy, welcome, my friend.
Thanks, Anthony. Thank you.
Pleasure's all mine to have you on. Randy, I wanted to have you on today, as I explained to you when I called you earlier today, to talk about your playing days in the Canadian Soccer League that was based coast to coast, first with the Toronto Blizzard, then the North York Rockets. Let's talk about those days. Talk a little bit about the quality and how important it was for that young Canadian player and that veteran Canadian player to have a reason to continue to play and an aspiration as a young kid to look forward to, as there was a real Canadian League coast to coast.
Yeah, no, it was a great place for Canadian players to play. It was competitive, and players got to train, play every day, and sort of the best in Canada playing against each other and training with each other. So it was great for development of players, great for development of coaches, great for development of referees. It was a real positive time in Canadian soccer.
Randy, let's talk about some of the youngsters that went on to success in that Canadian Soccer League. You and I both recall Paul Pesca-Solito with the Toronto Blizzard playing in the Canadian Soccer League, going on to success in Europe. Thomas Radinsky with the North York Rockets, you recall him, the speedy youngster at the age of 18, gets scouted, looked at, and brought overseas. I think this is vital that this new Canadian League that starts up gives these youngsters an opportunity mixed in with veterans so that they can go on to bigger and better leagues all over the world, Randy.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's what's been missing over the years in Canadian soccer is a professional league for players to aspire to, and once they get there to continue to develop, and I think it benefits all levels in Canadian soccer. It benefits the youth levels because they, like you say, they can aspire to play at a high level. And it benefits the national team because then your pool of players you select from is a lot larger, and because players are getting an opportunity to play every day, compete every week, and so if I recall correctly, I think after '86, the closest we came was in qualifying again was at the time when that Canadian League was in place. So.
You're absolutely bang on with that. That was the last time we were close at all. Randy, let's talk about the competition back then, the derbies, Toronto playing North York, Victoria Vistas taking on the Vancouver 86ers, on and on. It was fierce. It was a battle, and everything was left out there. Guys were playing for spots on the team because they were being paid. They weren't being paid great, but good enough to make a decent living, Randy. Talk about it.
Yeah, and that's what you get, and you get like for example, Southern Ontario, you can have amazing rivalries in Hamilton and London, and you develop rivalries in these cities, and that's what helps prepare players for the level, the intensity of these games, and the environment that these games are played in. So yeah, very important. Mm-hmm.
Randy, I want to talk about, to me, what is so important. I've said this on my show nonstop since I tweeted out the exclusive tweet about a new Canadian League in the first phase, which is done starting in 2018. Hopefully all is in order there. I tweeted out, I want this league 100% for Canadian coaches, players, referees, kitmen, administrators, on and on. And then after we kick off, I would say to revisit it maybe after 4 or 5 years, open it up, maybe a little bit less, maybe after the third year, to a couple open international spots. I want it to be just as difficult, Randy, as it is for our Canadian players to go down and play in MLS. I want it that difficult for an American, for anyone else to come up here to feel what our Canadian kids have felt for years and years. Your thoughts?
Well, I think you definitely need a balance, and I do think that you've got to remember that the purpose of the league, I believe, would be to develop Canadian players. But I think having some foreign influence is not a bad thing, and because young Canadian players can learn from European or South American veterans just as they can from Canadian veterans. But I think you've got to be careful that if you do allow Europeans or South American that you don't forget about the Canadian players. So I think you need a balance, and you see, I think the MLS is an example. They've sort of seems to have found a bit of a balance, and it's helped the American players in their program. So I wouldn't rule it out, but I think you just need to find a balance.
And that was the whole purpose going back many, many years ago. The reason why MLS was started, to help the American player go on to have success with the national team. And we've seen what Team USA has done over the last number of years. I've said this, Randy, people laugh at me, but I truly believe in my heart of hearts, whether it's the World Cup in Russia or Qatar, USA will knock on the door for a Final Four position. I love what they've done. And I credit MLS, I credit Don Garber. They've done so many wonderful things for their American players, coaches, on and on. And that's what I feel we need here for us to get back to our glory days like you saw in the World Cup in '86 in Mexico.
Yeah, definitely. I think the MLS has benefited the national team program in a huge way, and it's so important for all levels of soccer. I think to have our own professional league in Canada, and mentioned earlier, it'll benefit the youth development because obviously I think these teams will take an interest in developing youth players, and also our players who have reached that level will have an environment where they're competing at a high level, starting for these teams and playing week in and week out.
I couldn't agree with you more. Randy, you're at the University of Guelph, if I'm not mistaken. This year, you've been there, I believe, for a couple years, if not more. And I wanted to ask you this as well. We see in the NCAA down south, they have continuously produced players to go on to play in MLS in Europe on the national team. A great example is a Canadian coaching down at the University of Maryland. Sasha Sorowski has unbelievable success with that program and players. I believe here in Canada, it is something that is long overdue, that everyone needs to wake up, everyone that's involved, that we start giving full ride scholarships, if not full rides, three-quarter rides to men and women, to all the colleges and universities in Canada, and start doing what the NCAA does for our young people. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I do think, so you talk about the long-term player development and where university soccer in Canada fits in that pathway, and I think for the university soccer in Canada to be relevant, I think you do have to keep your best youth players here and playing for universities in Canada, and if better financial aid for these players or athletic scholarship for these players is, if that's what it takes, then you've got to take a serious look at that. But it would be nice to see players from the University Soccer in Canada be drafted to MLS teams, be drafted to the Women's Professional Soccer League, and so that should be our aspiration. And if it means investing more in the soccer programs in the universities, then I think we should do it, because it is a great environment for players to train and train daily and play every week.
Randy, just before we let you go, I really appreciate your time. I wanted to get your thoughts on this as we close it out. Many people have asked me in the last couple of weeks since I tweeted that out, but in the last number of years, Anthony, why did the CSL die? Why did the CSL go away? What went wrong? I want to get your thoughts in it, but I've said it time and time again. I think there was some real solid owners. I worked for one, Tony Fontana, that never missed a paycheck, treated the players like gold. But then there was some owners that treated the team like their toy and not like a business. And I believe this time around, when the league gets going, they'll have deep-pocketed, smart owners that will not treat it as a toy. What are your thoughts looking back then that you saw that, unfortunately was the demise of the CSL?
Well, I think you can underestimate the cost, and I think it does cost a lot to operate a professional team, and operating expenses, salaries. So I think you mentioned it, is that you really have to be careful when you grant these franchises to make sure that the owners are in it for the long haul, and so I think that's the maybe in the past owners went in not realizing exactly how costly that endeavor is. And so I think if you look at the MLS, I think they've been very careful in selecting their franchises to make sure they're sustainable and to make sure that they're, like I say, in it for the long haul. So I think you can learn from that.
Randy, you know, that's a great analysis on your part, and we really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule tonight. And as we let you go, I want to thank you for representing Canada at the World Cup in Mexico. I want to thank you for leaving it all out there for the national team, and I want to thank you for always answering the call, leaving blood, sweat, and tears elegantly like you did out there for the nation. You're not forgotten by myself and many. So thank you again, and God bless, and let's hope this league gets going.
I do too. I really hope it does. Thanks very much.
Joining us right now, a guy who I had the pleasure to watch on a number of occasions. Great hands, great vision, a leader, fierce competitor, former goalkeeper, played in the Canadian Soccer League with the Calgary Kickers in that beautiful city. Sven Habermann. Sven, welcome, my friend.
Hey, thank you very much for having me on.
Pleasure's all mine, Sven. Let's go back, way back when you played with the Calgary Kickers. Let's talk about it. Your time with that team. Talk about the travels from coast to coast in the Canadian Soccer League and the quality of play.
Well, we had kind of a neat arrangement. You know that when we started out this league, there wasn't a ton of money to be made. So John Catlett and myself actually had a pretty unique arrangement. We trained with amateur teams and then just flew in for the games, if you could believe that or not. And we still had a great year and won the championship.
Over the Hamilton Steelers, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, 2-1. Tino Lettieri was in goal. I remember that well.
Yeah, Tino Lettieri, oh boy, you're bringing memories to me now, Sven. Tino Lettieri played for Team Canada at that World Cup, and Tino Lettieri used to have, if you remember, a little parrot in the back of his net.
Oh, absolutely. We were roommates for many years, even in the '84 Olympics. Tino is a top quality guy, one of the funniest guys I've ever played with.
Absolutely. So, Sven, let's talk about the competition back then. Let's talk about the rosters filled with Canadians, youngsters and veterans that wanted to prove that they could play with anyone, and they were given that opportunity. How important is that, especially today with the knowledge and understanding we have that a new Canadian league will get going soon?
Yeah, I think what was really critical and why the Canadian team did so well in '84 and '86 is when the NASL started. We had 3 North Americans amongst really good professionals, and they from Europe and South America, and they sort of made us serve an apprentice and lay the groundwork for the Canadian soccer players. So flash forward 10 years after that, when we became veterans, and the young Canadian players were coming in, we sort of had a bit of a groundwork for them to follow that we learned from the Europeans, because let's face it, I think even when you look at the '86 World Cup team, we went through the rosters and we were all born outside of Canada. Myself in Germany, Tino, Italy, Bob Lenarduzzi, Italy, Jerry Gray, Scotland, Dave Norman, Scotland. You can go through just about the whole roster. And then you look at today's World Cup team, heck, it's just about the same thing. The most talented players aren't really true Canadians. So how do we do that? I mean, we got to develop the youth players. And I think with a new Canadian league, I'm pushing it at different levels, all the way from the youth, all the way to the professionals.
How vital is it, Sven, that everyone gets on board this Canadian train I've talked about, that everyone puts all the politics aside, all the bickering amongst each other, that we all gather and support this new league? We've seen what's happened the last World Cup qualifying. We're out again, and we know what the disaster that took place years ago in Honduras, on and on and on. We know what MLS is doing to our Canadian players. They're basically being disrespected and not treated the way they should be. But I thank MLS nonetheless for giving them an opportunity, because with even that, they would have had no opportunities at all. So to me, I believe it's vital. It's important the Canadian players get to play 90 minutes plus.
Absolutely. And they won't get a chance to prove themselves in big numbers. Let's just face it, the strikers that Canada has now, I think, will become world-class players. And they're getting pushed through into the MLS. So let's give that league credit for developing at the top. But that's only giving us 3 or 4 players at that elite level. we need the pro league right below it and then a semi-pro league below that so that the kids can be pushed at the different levels, because the cream always goes to the top. So anybody that's a really great player at 15 will play the next league at 17, 19, 21, and then hopefully the last league, the MLS. But we need a feeder system, and hopefully the Canadian League will do what the CSL League is and stand on its own for a while.
Sven, something we've done great in this country for a number of years, I could go back at least 40 years that I recall, is develop wonderful goalkeepers. We saw Milan Borjan stand on his head the last World Cup qualifying for Canada. That game in Honduras, the saves he made were unbelievable. Tino Lettieri, yourself, Onstad, Paul Dolan. We've developed and produced wonderful goalies. But again, these goalies would not be respected and treated fairly in Europe when they were, starting their careers. That's why I believe young goalkeepers belong here in Canada to groom and hone their skills. And then sure, if they're good enough, go to the Premiership, go to Serie A, go to the Bundesliga.
Yeah, you know what? That's the one thing that's so weird about Canadians is we've always had good goalkeepers. And in our era, there was Paul Dolan, myself, Tino Lettieri, Chris Turner, that wouldn't even give a guy like Craig Forrest a sniff because he was a couple of years younger. So Craig did the right thing. He went to Europe, and he put in his dues there. And I'll never forget, when he came back, we played in the Gold Cup together. It was Paul Dolan and myself at that time trying to win the first spot for Team Canada. And then this guy named Craig Forrest, who we knew played for Ipswich, came into the squad, and I was in awe. I thought, holy, here's a guy, 6'5", perfect frame for a goalkeeper, developed in England where he trained every day. And I made up my mind there that I think my time has come, and it may be time to move on. I think I was in my early 30s with Canada, and I said, no, this young guy, I think he's 5 or 6 years younger than me, is just phenomenal. And again, Canada has never struggled with goalkeepers, ever.
Sven, the time that I spent with the North York Rockets in the early 90s, 2 years as assistant general manager, to me, the biggest hurdle, the hurdle that was so hard to get over each and every year was the cost of flights going from one city to another. But I believe this time around, once this league gets going, there's got to be a better way for the travel costs to come down with a league like this when it gets going, because I'll never forget, I remember seeing the invoice still like it was yesterday, traveling out to Vancouver. It was $20K plus for a roster of about 22 people.
Yeah, well, what about the 1 year that Nova Scotia was in?
Yeah.
So we would travel from here, a 4.5-hour flight to Toronto, and then catch a connector 3.5. Absolutely. It's too bad our nation's so big and such a sparse populace. If you look at Europe, even look at Germany with 90 million people, but it's in a really small area. So obviously travel is not an issue. So that's one of the dilemmas we face. But the NHL's dealt with it. Why can't we?
I couldn't agree with you more. Sven, as we let you go, really appreciate your time. Give us a memory of playing in the Canadian Soccer League and also a memory with that Team Canada team.
Well, I'd say the biggest memory was qualifying for and getting to the semifinals in the '84 Olympics and beating Cameroon when they had the big star Roger Mila on there. And the CSL going 47 games, being the goalkeeper for the Vancouver 86ers and setting the record for 47 games undefeated as a professional soccer team. Those are probably two memories that I'll cherish.
Sven, it hit me right now. Was that the year you played with Enzo Conchina on that Olympic team?
No. That he came along a little bit later.
A little bit later.
Yep.
That was an unbelievable team that he was on as well, the team that you were on. Sven, listen, it's been a blast. Don't be a stranger. We'll get you on as we get closer and closer to more and more, words that are coming out about this new league, because we'd like to reminisce and remember the old times and look forward now for youngsters, Canadian youngsters that have an opportunity. Sven, thanks again. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure, and anytime, give me a shout.